Okay, so I did say that I was going to do a bit of an energizer. So first thing I'd like to do is, because we are talking about sales, if everybody wants to just stand up for a minute, find a partner, maybe someone that you haven't gotten to know quite as well yet. And I'd like you to take a minute or two and answer the following questions. What is the biggest challenge you have selling games? And what would you like to get from this session, and what would you like to contribute? So you've got about 2 minutes collectively to answer those questions. Introduce yourself if you don't know who you are. Time starts now. Okay, stop. Now, thank your partner. Now, I want you and your partner to go find another group of partners. And I'm going to give you just a little bit longer, and I want you to kind of share together what patterns or things that came up for you. So again, you're going to have another couple of minutes. So you and your partner go find another partner and answer again these same 2 questions. What's the biggest challenge selling games? What would you like to get from this session? How would you like to contribute? Okay, if you want to start wrapping up that conversation. Okay, let's stop soon. High five everyone in your group. Thank them very much. Now, who had the best group here? Yeah. Okay, so anybody want to share some of the themes or patterns that they saw coming up around this issue of, whether it's inside your organization or as a consultant to outside organizations, some of the difficulties you have in selling games? Anybody want to share?
Startup. Or now I'm hoping to learn how to accelerate sales. So having that broader conversation, that broader language around what innovation games means, I think will help me add more value to the people I work with.
And did anyone kind of pick up a little bit on a twist here, which is not just what do you want to get from the session, but what do you want to contribute? Because it's very subtle difference, but it makes a big difference. So what we just did is a mashup of a new tool that I like called Liberating Structures. Has anyone here heard of Liberating Structures? Great, thank you. So the kind of subtitle is Simple Rules to Unleash a Culture of Innovation. And the mashup that we did was impromptu networking, which generally you do in sets of pairs 2 or 3 times, and it's a really great icebreaker. But the other one that's really kind of fun is this 1, 2, 4, all. And the idea is you do it once on, you reflect on your own, you reflect with 2 people, you reflect with 4 people, and then you share with the room. I've been using some of these really and having a lot of fun. One of my favorites is what they call Trico Consulting. And it's basically a triad. And one person acts as the client, and the 2 other people act as consultants. And you have a problem that you want to solve or an issue that you're having, and it works really well with peers when you haven't had a chance, when you really want to elicit some more information. And then they ask a few clarifying questions, but here's a really interesting twist. You literally have the client turn around so that they're not facing you. So what you find happens, which is very interesting, is first of all, the client is listening a lot harder than they normally would if they were being face-to-face. And the other thing is the consultants, as they start brainstorming interesting ideas on how to help you, they're not influenced by your body language. And so the feedback from that has been really great. So I was hoping not many of you had seen this before, so this is something new that you can put into your toolbox. It scales on lots of different levels. Open space, I think a lot of us have experienced here it because we're more from the Agile community. But if you go outside of this community, it's amazing how little people have experience with something like open space. So just go to Liberating Structures. Everything's free online. You can grab the book. I was asked to, well, I submitted my idea under the idea of sales enablement. So I thought it'd be good to start putting anything in context because I love putting things in context. I feel that that is a great way to start, whether I'm working with teams or just working as a freelance consultant. So it's processes, practices, and tools that improve the performance of your sales organization. And it really directly impacts the sales team's ability to make more deals. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about myself and this case study because we've been doing a lot of show and tells that I'm going to use for this. So my name is Nancy Mayer. I'm from Toronto. I consider myself an opportunist in the most positive sense of the word. My big opportunity in life was I am a professor's daughter, so I got a free education. Maybe that helped me become a little bit of a learnaholic. You know, some people say learn it all. I'm like a little worse than that. It's really like almost a disease. And you will know, as Luke already said, I've been to every conference, and everybody that I meet, and a lot of the ideas that I get are going to a lot of different conferences. So, I started my career after doing my MBA as an artist manager and proudly have some gold and platinum records in my collection. Then I was an event manager, did some music industry conferences, took a small national industry conference into a large international Canadian Music Week that now has a festival component to it and attracts over 160,000 fans and industry people from all over the world. Then I got involved. I was a national event manager for a large Canada's longest run, actually the world's longest running motorcycle charity event called Ride for Sight, and proudly took them from about 600,000 to 1.2 million in donations in less than 2 years using, lots of communication strategies and things. Then I got into manufacturing and marketing and spent about a decade on the road hawking socks. So I had a high-tech boot and sport sock, but that's not really that. And then I reinvented myself. I always loved getting things done and having more fun. So I got into project management, and through that got into Agile. And through Agile, learned about innovation games and Agile games and all sorts of fun stuff. So at one of the many, many conferences that I've gone to, I met this guy by the name of Ron Sievert, and he runs the National Sports Forum. Now, in the sponsorship world, sports is like the king. And he basically came up with this system to help other companies, associations, especially associations and conferences, get more sponsorship because it is the #1 growing segment of the sponsorship market. And I saw his initial presentation. I go, oh, I love this. This is a great system. But I also knew that I could add some value, so we started working together, and now I do promote it and train it, and I help associations and conferences with this kind of hybrid that we built together. And when I'm out there talking, one of the things that I learned from the Agile community and the games community is this idea of visual thinking, design thinking, and gamification. Now, here in this room, you guys are a really, really small percentage of the population that have actually even heard, let alone applied these ideas to their businesses. So, for the purpose of today, I created the 5 steps to gaming your sales team. Step 1 is to know your game. Step 2 is to storm your prospects, draft your players, create your playbook, and run your game. So step 1, because we've also been talking about different layers, I kind of segmented them into collaborative, collective thinking, competition, creativity, and communication. So that's kind of an additional layer that I put on just for you guys. So step 1, know your game. I personally like to use a value proposition canvas. So when I was at the Innovation Games Summit a couple of years ago, I got a chance to meet Alexander Osterwalder, and I fell in love with the business model canvas. It was, for me, one of the most playful, interactive, strategic planning tools that I had seen in a really long time. Went off, got certified, and part of Alexander's team is in Toronto, and I've kept in close contact with them. As Luke has showed you, Innovation Games is now in the new book. The new book only came out like less than a month ago, so it is pretty exciting news. Has everybody here used the value proposition canvas? Yeah. So, and I know Deb was telling me that she brought it up and we talked a little bit about it as well in the class. But what I love about it is it's even more than an empathy map. So when you're working with sales teams, the first thing that I find is they might have a lot of product knowledge, but they don't have a lot of application of how their product solves their customers' problems. So this is a great collaboration where you can really start thinking about what are our customers' pains, what are our customers' gains, what are the jobs that they need to get done, and then map it out so that you have a common language there. One of the things that I just added into the presentation, because the book is so new, for those of you that were just using the value proposition canvas earlier through the blogs that Alexander had put up, there is a lot of great new things in the book. I highly recommend getting it. You have the ad-lib value proposition template, which kind of helps you with your pitch or your elevator pitch, and then you can actually take the jobs and prioritize the jobs, and then because you're testing a hypothesis, they now have test cards, and learning cards of what did you learn from your first pivot. So, but to get right down to it, what I really love is this idea of that tweak around what is the job that needs to get done. So a couple of people have been talking about Clay Christensen, so I have this embedded right in here, but I think I'm going to quickly go out and play it on the full screen for you.
Hi, my name's Clay Christensen. I'm a professor at the Harvard Business School. I brought with me a set of puzzles, all related to innovation. We decided that the way we teach marketing is at the core of what makes motivation difficult to achieve. The most helpful way we've thought of it so far is that we actually hire products to do things for us. And understanding what job we have to do in our lives for which we would hire a product is really the key to cracking this problem of motivating customers to buy what we're offering. So I wanted just to tell you a story about a project we did for one of the big fast food restaurants. They were trying to goose up the sales of their milkshakes. They had just studied this problem up the gazoo. They brought in customers who fit the profile of the quintessential milkshake consumer. And they'd give them samples and ask, could you tell us how we can improve our milkshakes so you'd buy more of them? Do you want it chocolatey or cheaper, chunky or chewier? They get very clear feedback. They would then improve the milkshake on those dimensions, and it had no impact on sales or profits whatsoever. So one of our colleagues went in with a different question on his mind, and that was, I wonder what job arises in people's lives that cause them to come to this restaurant to hire a milkshake. So we stood in a restaurant for 18 hours one day and just took very careful data. What time did they buy these milkshakes? What were they wearing? Were they alone? Did they buy other food with it? Did they eat it in the restaurant or drive off with it? It turned out that nearly half of the milkshakes were sold before 8 o'clock in the morning. The people who bought them were always alone. It was the only thing they bought, and they all got in the car and drove off with it. So to figure out what job they were trying to hire it to do, we came back the next day and stood outside the restaurant so we could confront these folks as they left, milkshake in hand. And in language that they could understand, we essentially asked, excuse me please, but I got to sort this puzzle out. What job were you trying to do for yourself that caused you to come here and hire that milkshake? And they'd struggle to answer, so we'd then help them by asking other questions like, well, think about the last time you were in the same situation, needing to get the same job done, but you didn't come here to hire a milkshake. What did you hire? And then as we put all of their answers together, it became clear that they all had the same job to do in the morning, and that is they had a long and boring drive to work. And they just needed something to do while they drove to keep the commute interesting. One hand had to be on the wheel, but somebody had given them another hand and there wasn't anything in it. And they just needed something to do while they drove. They weren't hungry yet, but they knew they'd be hungry by 10 o'clock, so they also wanted something that would just pull down there and stay for their morning. Good question. What do I hire when I do this job? You know, I've never framed the question that way before, but last Friday I hired a banana to do the job. Take my word for it, never hire bananas. They're gone in 3 minutes, you're hungry by 7:30. If you promise not to tell my wife, I'd probably hire donuts twice a week, but they don't do it well either. They're gone fast, they crumb all over my clothes, they get my fingers gooey. Sometimes I hire bagels, but as you know, they're so dry and tasteless. Then I have to steer the car with my knees while I'm putting jam on them, and then if the phone rings, we got a crisis. I remember I hired a Snickers bar once, but I felt so guilty I've never hired Snickers again. Let me tell you, when I come here and hire this milkshake, it is so viscous that it easily takes me 20 minutes to suck it up that thin little straw. Who cares what the ingredients are? I don't. All I know is I'm full all morning and it fits right here in my cup holder. Well, it turns out that the milkshake does the job better than any of the competitors, which in the customer's minds are not Burger King milkshakes, but it's bananas, donuts, bagels, Snickers bars, coffee, and so on. But I hope you can see how, if you understand the job, how to improve the product becomes just obvious.
So by putting things in context of the job that needs to get done, I think you can see that you do have a whole different language that you can use with your sales teams, and your sales teams have a much better understanding about what they're actually selling. So because there are a lot of agile people, the other trend that I see that's kind of interesting is this replacing user story with job story. Because sometimes a user story, you're creating a persona, but in fact, the job that needs to get done could be applicable to a variety of different personas. So it's just, again, a little bit of a tweak, but it's something that I think is really valuable. So that's step number one, know the game. And that's just both from your product side and from your customer side. As Luke was saying, that there's also, within the book, different innovation games that you can play within working on the value proposition canvas. So next is storm your prospects. So this is really kind of more of a collective thinking. And again, when we went back to visual thinking, we all know the benefits of putting stuff up on the wall. So generally speaking, I start with more of a silent storming, like who are your categories, because this is for sponsorship. In sponsorship, you have two types of ways that sponsors can help you. Number one is they can give you money, or number two, they can save you money. So there's in-kind sponsors and there's other type of sponsors. I'm really not going to get into a lot of detail about the actual sponsorship ideas, but how you build a war room. So first, brainstorm, and then silent storm, put it up on the wall, start brainstorming together, and just start taking a look at every single category that might be applicable. And then collectively, again, start storming every single possible person or client that might fit underneath that category. So again, it's fun, it's visual, it's what if, a little bit of the design thinking and thinking outside of the box, and it can be a lot of fun. Now, the difference between the cards that you saw on the war room wall are what I call prospecting cards. So it's not a user story, but you do capture all the information on the company, the context, the comments, and then you use them to prioritize who's your hottest lead within that category. And then you track them by actions. And very often we have little different colored dots or pieces of paper that we attach to them, because there's a very interesting persistence formula, and this is can be a little bit serious gaming too, and that is like, if you call them on Monday, you don't call them again until Thursday. So there's a whole way that you track and follow up. And then on top of that, based on results, you grade them, you have a grading box, and so if you're a sales manager, you basically work with your team and you get a report at the end of every week, and that'll give you a much better idea on where your status is using the grading box and the follow-up. And again, very much like a product owner, you can go in and look at the task board and kind of get a real quick snapshot of what's going on. Some of the other tools that I've stolen on that sales process is really just maybe a weekly stand-up meetings. Dailies, you can do them as well, but generally speaking, a lot of times in sales organizations or sales teams, there isn't a lot of communication. You know, people are very sometimes territorial. So by doing a weekly stand-up, and again, it's that transparency. Everybody knows what's going on, and I find it's been very, very effective. And then I like to mix kind of some old stuff and some new stuff. Luke was talking about Management 3.0 and Jürgen Apollo and some of the work that he's doing, and he also has a brand new book out called Management 3.0 Workouts. One of the workouts is this personal map, which is really kind of fun. So whether it's for your clients that you're pursuing, or your prospects, or it's just somebody on your team, this idea of a personal map is really fun. It's like mind mapping, and then I use something like the McKay 66, which was developed in the 1930s by an envelope company, and it was the 66 key questions that you need to know about your customer to build that relationship. And even during the Depression, the McKay envelope company around Carnegie and all those guys was the most successful envelope company because of the relationships he had built based on these 66 questions. So I like to use those as kind of trigger questions, but then I like to use like the mind mapping, more visual techniques to monitor my people. And as I get to know them more, you open your book and you add a few more nodes in there. And so it's kind of fun, a little more creative. Step 3, draft your players. So if you have worked with sales guys, or gals, something that makes a good salesperson is they have to have a bit of a competitive nature. So you don't want to, we've got them collaborating, we've got them thinking together, but you still got to put in the competition. So especially Ron and the work that he does, it's very, very sports oriented. So they use a fantasy draft system to allocate the clients to the salespeople. So it can actually be a lot of fun. Generally speaking, depending on people's results, gives them better positioning in the draft. Has everybody here played some sort of draft fantasy? Yeah, so basically, the number 1 goes first until the end, and then the last one goes up, and then, so you do that until everything's kind of picked, and then you can negotiate, and then you can have some fun. But, it's a great way that the people who are really passionate about certain categories or about certain people get people that they want to work with, and it kind of distributes some of the categories across, the team, so it's not like one person gets all the best. And I like that. I don't always play fantasy football, but when I do, I kick ass. Next thing I introduce is this idea of product in a box. But where the twist is a little bit different is I have the individual salespeople put together their own product box. And again, what's so interesting is that every single salesperson has a different take on what they're selling and how they sell it. So, it just floored me how little overlap there is. And then when they do the pitch, it's great because everybody else gets to get a chance to see where someone else's mind is at. Oh, and that would work really well for me. And, so by doing product in a box and then having them do the pitch, it's a great way to get the creativity, to start getting them to think about what are the features and benefits and, how can I best sell this to my clients. And then you got to run your game plan. So script. I also put in a computer script in there, but it's really helpful for salespeople to start getting a script and learning what to say, what works, what doesn't work. And then when you polish your pitch, and even though it's not a game, it's kind of a gaming format where you are role playing, and you can get everybody else, as someone's doing their pitch, to bring up obstacles and play different roles so that the salespeople in a very safe environment can test things out and get comfortable at asking for money and things like that in a much safer environment, and then just drilling it, and of course celebrating is super big in everything that we do. So the little wins, the big wins. Some of the other ideas that I've used in this environment, because again, as I say, a lot of times in the sales environments, they've never really done anything like this. But again, taking the time to plan, using kind of that sprint mentality where every 2 weeks or every month you sit down and you take another look at your goals and what's the vision. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do around vision and mission in different games that I could talk about, where you have shared goals. You can use Nosy. There's some other innovation games that you can kind of get to a point where the sales team does have shared vision, shared mission, shared values. Then retrospectives, this opportunity again to look back, what's working, what's not working, and doing it in a way that shares all the information. So this one in the corner with all the cards that you see is based on the work of Roger Greenaway, and this is someone that I met at the Agile Games. He's British. There's a lot of outward bound type of stuff, and it's called reviewing. So, which is really retrospectives and different ways to take a look at, the experience that you had. So I really liked this format because it gets people to think about things in a little bit different way. So diamonds would be, what did you learn that you expected to learn? Okay, the hearts are, how did you feel? Because that's a lot of times we don't really talk about feelings. The club is, wow, what did you learn that you didn't expect to learn? What was those aha moments? Like, wow, that was really cool. And the clubs, how are you going to take this out into the future? How are you going to use this information to make a difference in what you're doing? And the joker, you just always have to have it there just because it's like you're a banana thought. And of course, we've talked about innovation games and, and just measuring things, because I find sometimes outside of the software industry, they're not as proficient with metrics, especially on the sales side. The digital media side, pretty standard, but in the sales side, and again, that's just another fun tool from Jürgen Apollo, the metrics ecosystem. He's got some great stuff. One of the other ones that I love is the champ frogs, which are motivational movers, and it's based on intrinsic motivators, and you get everybody to play their cards in priority of what's most important to them, and then everybody gets a chance to talk about it. So the more you get to know your team, the better you can motivate them. So especially with sales guys, like if freedom and it's important, then you put that number one, then you make sure that that person's got a lot of space to do what they need to do. I could pull that up later if you want, but I didn't want to over-inundate you with too many things. But yeah, I highly recommend Management 3.0 workout. Has everybody heard of Management 3.0? Okay, so just for those of you that haven't, the concept is Management 1.0 is when you built your company like a machine. So the industrial age, so one thing does another, and that's where we see a lot of siloed industries. In the 80s and 90s, Management 2.0 was more like a sports team. Woo, we're all going towards one end goal. But with the software giants and a lot of the companies in this new economy that are doing well, they're building their company like a community. So it's not just what your people can do for you, but what can you do for them? And really getting to know them and looking after their interests. And ultimately what that allows you to do is not just attract, but keep the best talent. And I think, that's a big issue for everybody, is the hiring. So if you find great people and you treat them really well and you care about them and they feel like you care, you're going to keep them. So a couple of other fun bonus tools I like. For team building, this is the Fascinate Advantage Assessment. It's by Sally Hogshead, who wrote a book called Fascinate. She came from the copywriting and advertising industry and started running all these tests and came up with a different kind of personality test. So most of us are familiar with the Myers-Briggs, the DISC, everything else, and that's really kind of how you fit in the world. What's so fascinating about this work is what are the two core attributes or values that you have that others value in you. So it's how this is from her latest book, is how the world sees you. And if you have yourself, we're all selling. It doesn't matter what we do, but for your salespeople to understand what the highest values that others value in them helps them communicate more effectively. And there's a whole big package that you can buy so that you can set your team up. You develop anthems, and everybody has their anthems. So I know there were a lot of people who start, have the Strength Finder stuff, and they, have their Strength Finder things in their offices or on their badges. This is a little bit different, where you can put your anthem in your office, and it gives people an insight into you. But more importantly, I really love it because it gives an insight into yourself, because I sometimes find that's the hardest thing. It's like, well, give me feedback. And I think the idea of using games for your performance review, and that idea of like giving people an opportunity to let me know what I can do better and what I can learn about myself is huge. From a proposal standpoint, it's been brought up, slide docs, the work of Nancy Duarte. I just find that doing proposals now in that combination of slide or picture and documentation and making it really easy to go through makes a big difference in helping the sales team get out there and pitch. And you can put it together as a deck and send it out, and it's really fast and easy and fun, and it communicates much more effectively. Some of the other ideas, we've talked about customer advisory boards, so yeah, discovery games, shaping games, very often for big conferences and things, you have a steering committee. So, I just love the games because it allows you to get way better feedback. And we have been talking about how surveys suck, and I do agree. I do think that there are certain things that you can do with surveys that make them a little more engaging. Some of the stuff that I've seen that I like is a little bit shorter polling questions on a more ongoing basis. There's some really neat technologies out there. I don't know they're that ground shaking, but that to be able during the conference to put out a question on a topic that was just on, and asking a polling question and starting to get information and data on your customer. Because in the sponsorship space, especially in the sales space, but more so in the sponsorship space, it's really, really important to get as much information as you can on your clients, on what their buying habits are, because the real key to the sponsorship element is being able to take your numbers and translate them into dollars. And that's kind of the trend that's going on in the sponsorship industry. So, if you had the Agile community had 6,000 members, but you knew that some of them had families and they eat out this often, or they're buying a new house, or they're buying a new car. You can say, 20% of our make this much money and are going to be buying a $40,000 car. That's really like maybe a $2-3 million sales opportunity, because believe me, product managers in the are desperate to find ways to get directly to their customers. So the wrap up, know your game, storm your prospects, draft your players, define your playbook, and run your game plan. There's one other thing I just wanted to share with you, because it came up yesterday, and that is, for those of you that, because Jonathan, who we talked about, is not going to be able to be here. There's a guy by the name of Hugh McLeod who came from the agile industry, and he's become an artist. And his company is motivational art for smart people. So if you're looking at team building or morale building or stuff inside your company, this is really fun. I've had a lot of different clients buy this stuff. Every day, if you sign up, it's just gapingvoid.com. You get a free cartoon every single day. And yesterday just happened to be there is no purpose without play. And I thought that was like, whoa, so appropriate. And every single image, I can't, it's not scrolling properly, but has a whole story behind it. So that's fun too. Any questions? That's it. That's it for me. Thank you.
So are there any questions for Nancy? Because this is an emerging application area of using games or game-like techniques in sales and the sales process. Jesse's got one.
So what was interesting to me was borrowing a page from the fantasy football phenomenon. And so my question to you is, how did you do the allocation of clients to players? I'm thinking of like ways to.
Well,
what technology did you use, or did you just put names in a bowl?
It depends on the size of the sales team, but generally speaking, there is a bit of a seniority thing and based on sales results. So if you're a top salesperson, you usually have the first pick. There's not really players, so the players are the categories. So if you are the top performer, you get first pick of the first category that you desperately want to have in your portfolio.
But the point being that you designed a custom game to achieve that.
And this is where this is more how Ron works, and I've been working with him. So it's not so much custom, it's just the idea of a draft pick to allocate categories or territories or clients. So, like I said, it depends on your team, but you got to have a little bit of a competitive, fun nature in there. And then when people get to pick the territories or the customers or the categories that they're really passionate about, we just see a real kind of positive impact from letting them play a little bit. And the negotiation part is really fun too. So if someone got a category or a client that's kind of yours, and they go, well, and then the wheeling and dealing, which is all part of the sales process. So did that answer your question? Great.
How do you get the sales team to engage? I mean, salespeople are supposed to be out in the field selling. So how do you get, your sales team to take time out to engage in a game like this?
It's how you set it up. I mean, if you have a new product that you're just about to launch, or and sometimes if you can, you create the time, and then you find that by getting them to interact and have fun together. So by starting with that collaborative piece and really taking a look again at who is our customer, what are their pains and gains, and how does our product differentiate itself from everything else in the marketplace? Because there is a lot of divergent sales practices, and that's probably not in the best interest of your company. So the more you can have everybody on the same page, and I'm kind of excited, and have a better understanding of what they're selling and a shared language, it kind of pulls the team together. So yes, sales teams aren't traditionally used to collaborating, but when you do, because they're still a team.
Nancy, couldn't you hook some of this into their annual sales kickoff, and like you said, on a product launch when they're doing training? And part of the reason I'm asking that is because Katie's new to her job at Reed Elsevier, but I'm going to have to tell her about the 150-person sales training kickoff meeting we did in London for Reed. So there's some natural things that occur, right?
So my background is sales.
Yeah.
In this company, that's where I started. And salespeople, yes, part of the training, part of their kickoff, they will take 3 days to go to a conference, but that's it. Every other, I mean, they're making money only when they're out in the field. So we find that it's hard enough to get them to give us customers to test with because they're afraid we're going to mess up the sales process. And then to get them out of the field to do activities, I see the value. It's just
Right. So if they can understand that the lessons out in the field that other people are getting, so that's why I didn't say a daily stand-up, maybe a weekly stand-up, maybe every 2 weeks, but just an opportunity to answer, what am I doing? Who have I closed? Who am I going after? What's standing in my way? And then, and it gets them working together a little bit better because, yeah, you're right. Salespeople tend to be lone wolves, but they can learn from each other. And that's why, there's definitely a competitive element to it. And, I mean, that's just the system that we have found works very, very well for motivating a sponsorship team because, that they're kind of done on an annual basis. Does that answer your question? Okay, great.
I had a question. I was very interested when you talked about silos to team sports to communities as that evolution. Can you talk a little bit more about communities and how do we leverage that trend with games to interact at higher levels with our top customers? Buy Management 3.0 workouts, which is a new book, pretty much 98% of his book is online for free. And Jürgen Apollo has spent years and years getting really down deep into how to change the culture, but the fact is that if you want to have an agilist type of culture, you want to have a community-based culture, it has to start with management. So he gives you all sorts of management workouts or tools that you can start initiating, like delegation poker, like all sorts of really cool things. Do you have anything to add on that? Because you know Jürgen probably better than I do, Luke.
So the answer is I have a few things to add. Jürgen is definitely a leader in this field. He's got a lot of really great stuff. He's also got a lot of people in our community of innovation games people in Europe.
Yep.
But I'm not going to answer any of it here because some form of liquid refreshment that's interesting and beautiful and no, Tammy? Is that not until 6?
Wow.
6. Oh, I thought it said 5. I didn't have my glasses on. Sorry.
Did I finish really early?
Oh no, you're right on time.
Okay.
So the answer is there's a variety there's a whole plethora of serious games exploding into the market right now. So for example, the year after we published Innovation Games, Lego Serious Play came out, and then we saw a few other things like tick forward. So I think the question that you're asking is a little blunt, so it's hard to answer. Other than and that's why Nancy's answering in kind of a blunt way. It's like the very open-ended question, read the book. But if you have a more specific question, we could probably help you navigate into a specific part in the multidimensional space.
Great. So do, I guess, companies now perceive that community aspect as something that they want align to companies to buy with those? Is that the philosophy in there?
You mean the community of salespeople or the community of customers?
Well, she says, I think she's talking about community as a culture within an organization. I'm saying community as, okay, but how do you advertise that we are that community that can support you in a new way better than just a goal-oriented company? Yeah,
I think that and I don't consider myself any expert on creating communities because this is the community that we're trying to continue to bootstrap. And it's funny how, like people like Andrea, they come in and then how do we continue to grow? People participate in a community when it and this is obviously mom and apple pie, right? When they have shared interest with shared goals and they get some kind of value. I think the most interesting sales quote I've ever had, 2 years ago, Cisco hired us to do a sales enablement global set of games with, we invited 1,200 Cisco salespeople from around the world to play 3 different versions of visual collaboration game. One was straightforward speedboat, what slows you down in your sales process from getting the information you need. One was race car, what slows you down in closing your deal fast. And one was a game that we designed that we called Money Chest. And Money Chest was how can you make your sale bigger? And we had more than 250 people from Cisco collaborate in, Laura, do you remember it was like 24, 25, 30 games, something like that? Yeah, it was around 30, right? And we grunged up all that data and presented it back to Cisco. The most interesting thing that we got out of that in terms of the quotes and several different games, and this is why you want to have those games, because in a sense, to Hart's talk, a game is an isolated occurrence. So if you have a large room and you throw out a question and everyone nods, you don't know what the signal strength is. One of the most amazing things that we saw in the Cisco data, and this was like direct chat quotes, was we collaborate when the deal is hard to close the deal, even when collaborating is not in our financial best interest.
Mm-hmm. And that's why if you start a little bit earlier in the collaboration process and everybody knows what's going on and you have more transparency, what ends up happening is, we've seen salespeople collaborate, share commissions because they're getting the job done, and and they're feeling like they're actually contributing. Because I think when you go back to this whole question about community, it's that feeling of contributing. It's like and I found this and I just put it up, but this is champ frogs. So these are your intrinsic motivators. And the way Jürgen plays, you get a card for each one and you order it in what is your personal motivators. And so if you can understand that about every single person on your team and take it even one step further to people in your organization, then because this is a kind of Daniel Pinky too, but purpose. If you can put the work that they're doing in context so they feel like they're doing something important, it's a huge difference. And then if you can watch what they're interested in and support them in their own personal mastery, that gives you tons and tons of points and creates that kind of community situation. And of course, be clear enough that exactly what you expect. That makes people a lot more comfortable, and then let them do it any way that they want to do it, that autonomy. And that's where innovation happens. It's, so this is just, again, it's a card game, it's a game, but I played this with a bunch of project managers a couple weeks ago, and within like 10 minutes, 2 people who had never met before probably knew more about each other and how to work with them and how to motivate them than they did anybody in their company. And I also let them take the cards home and play it with their spouses too, because it's just a little insight that if you understand really what motivates the other person, then you can use that to support them.
And could I offer one more element of sales in terms of this notion of community? I think that to Katie's point, when you actually look at the job of the salesperson, kind of like the job of the product manager, super demands on time, overwhelming time. Anything that's not directly related to the sale is considered overhead. So yes, I'm supposed to update my Salesforce, and it's really hard. So how do I do that? Right? So I think that going back to what Nosy represents for Serena software, yep, is a means by which a salesperson is playing a game with customer for one reason: they see value. But it's constructed in such a way that marketing gets value because the data feeds the database, and it has elements over our roadmap for Nosy that we've not yet implemented, so I don't want to sound like I'm selling vaporware, but our roadmap of Nosy is once you know your customers' priorities and you've helped them build a shared alignment, now the salesperson can dip into other resources to help them sell in that process. And we have had signal strength from the salespeople. Yeah, I'll use a community when they're helping me out. And the principle of social reciprocity, I'm going to say it wrong, right, is that if they get help, they'll give help. And that's what we also saw in the Cisco data from their sales enablement project, that when they gave help and they got help, that's what formed the community, not any management function saying you should join the community, not the existence of the community. It was I gave you a little and I got benefit, or you gave me a little and I got benefit, and that's that social, like, because they want to help make that sale. That's what forms the community.
And the collaboration, because sales is a part of marketing, and what happens so often is marketing gets all the marketing research details, and then they use it to craft the message. But if it's not shared with the sales, I mean, if you're a good salesperson and you can get that information, then those are trigger spots that you can use to your advantage when you are face-to-face with that person. And, again, the prioritization and the competition, and by having a visual board in your war room really does motivate the team. Yes, the team's out on the road a lot, and, we can talk about developing additional, perhaps online task boards that could do similar types of things to keep people motivated. But, it creates a double function by using more visual thinking tools, which at this point in time just really are not that prevalent in the sales organization.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.